Zoning Board of Appeals. We're going to start out with some quick housekeeping items. First on the agenda is a number of bills that we need to get approved. First is a bill for $243.88 to the Worcester Telegram and Gazette for the July 25th, 2022 legal notices. Can I get a motion, please?
I move to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Next, $88.55 to the Community Advocate for August 29th, 2022 legal notices.
Move to approve.
Can I second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Next, 4708 to WB Mason for office supplies.
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And last is $1,600 to Weston and Sampson. It's a peer review fee for the Point at Hills Farm.
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you. First, next on our list is to review and approve minutes for the July 25th, 2022 minutes. Any discussion? Can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Second?
Whoops.
Oh, sorry, second. So moved. Everybody approves?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Wonderful. All right, now we're going to move on to our public hearing. First hearing on the agenda tonight. This is to hear the appeal of Julianne Mecca, 26 Old Mill Road, Shrewsbury, Mass., for a special permit to the Shrewsbury zoning bylaws, Section 4B, to construct an addition on a pre-existing non-conforming dwelling and lot upon the property located at 26 Old Mill Road in the Residence B1 District. The subject premise is described on the Shrewsbury Assessor's Tax Plate 26, Plot 027000. Welcome, and if we could have your name for the record, please.
Sure. Thank you very much. My name is Julianne Mecca, and I am looking to construct an addition on my property at 26 Old Mill Road.
Okay, great. Do you have any further information you'd like to share with us? We do have the information you've submitted, but maybe an idea of what the scope of the project would be?
Yeah, the plans that I have submitted in the documentation is a 12 by 15 lot addition, which is going to be a master bath and master closet off of my bedroom.
Okay. Ms. McAllister, anything?
Yep, this is hopefully one of the last ones the board will see. This is a expansion of living space on a non-conforming lot based on the town meeting changes. We hope to have that approved by the Attorney General's office shortly and no longer need to hear appeals such as these.
Okay. Great. Let me work my way through the board, see if anyone has any questions, comments. Peter?
I just had a question. Was this noticed as construction of a deck?
Yeah.
I have an existing deck.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering, we have an agenda here that has it as a special permit to construct a deck.
Okay.
And if that's not what the public notice said, then that's fine. But if it's just a,
Double check.
yeah, because we can't vote on it, I
We
think.
could not. I think we would then continue it and, that would be unfortunate. However, let me double check.
Yeah. It's a public meeting law requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is on the agenda. Legal notice says construct an addition.
Okay,
Okay, great.
So we're good.
All right.
That's
my
fine.
my apologies for the agenda.
No problem.
Must have been a staff oversight, but it's been noticed properly.
Okay.
Okay, so that was my only question.
Okay.
So-
Matt?
For me.
Patrick?
Looks good to me.
Okay. Ann?
I have no questions.
Great. I have no questions either, so if we could get a motion to approve, please?
Public hearing.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to skip away. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to be heard on this matter? Okay,
Okay, so I move to close the public hearing.
thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I get a motion, please?
Move to approve a special permit under Section 4B to construct an addition on a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling at 26 Old Mill Road in the Residence B1 District.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very
Good
much.
luck. All right. Next 6:30 hearing. This is to hear the appeal of Greystone Development East LLC, 1 Federal Street, Suite 1804, Boston, Mass., for a comprehensive permit pursuant to the provision of Chapter 40B, Section 20 to 23 of the Massachusetts General Law to permit the construction of a 196-unit age-restricted apartment community upon property located at 409 South Street, Shrewsbury, Mass., in the Office Research District. The subject premise are described on the Shrewsbury Assessor's Tax Plate 42, Plot 012000.
Madam Chair, may I
Yes.
just say, to the previous appeal, would you mind just announcing, or if you don't mind me doing so, you'll be notified of your decision by mail. You're welcome to head out if you'd like.
Is there an appeals period?
There will be, I'll follow up with you via email.
Okay, great, thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Yep, sorry.
Appreciate that.
Continue.
Thank you. Welcome. Could you state your
Evening.
name for the record?
Yeah, my name is Chris Legetsky. I am with Graystar Development East LLC.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you for having me tonight. I've prepared a presentation on the project that we are looking to discuss tonight. If it's all right, I'll put that on the screen and go through
Madam
go through the
Chair.
materials together.
Yep.
If you wouldn't mind me just saying, I
Yep.
was hoping that we'd have our technical assistant present first. Would that be at the,
Yes.
okay.
So this evening, we have Paul Haverty. He's from the Mass Housing Partnership Technical Assistance Program. We appreciate the assistance that you're going to give us with working through the process of the 40B project. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to you so you can explain to us what our obligations are tonight.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Paul Haverty from Blattman, Bobrowski, Haverty, and Silverstein in Concord, Massachusetts. I'm here representing the board via a grant from the Mass Housing Partnership in its Technical Assistance Program. I have in front of me a PowerPoint presentation that I've given in past. I'm just going to run through this really quickly. It's just a very quick overview of how Chapter 40B works.
Madam Chair, does he need the cord for the folks at home?
I wasn't going to share it. I was just going
Oh,
to,
okay.
I'm just going to run right through it.
I understand.
Because I'm going to skip over half of it.
Okay.
This is going to be just really quick. So first is I just wanted to cover what the statutory and regulatory requirements are for the safe harbors. So I think most people are familiar with the fact that a town is subject to having to approve Chapter 40B applications if they have less than 10% of the year-round housing units as restricted as affordable in the town. There are also a couple of other statutory safe harbors. There's also the 1.5% total land area minimum requirement. This is something that a lot of the municipalities in closer proximity to the city that have smaller land areas are seeking to establish. There hasn't been a ton of success. The process is very complex to try to establish that. And then the third is the 0.3 of the total land area zone in the community. This is a statutory provision that I literally have never seen claimed. I wouldn't know how to tell you how to operate it if somebody did try to claim it, but that is one of them. Then there are also regulatory safe harbors. There's housing production plans, so if the town has an affordable housing plan that it has adopted, it can potentially assert a safe harbor if you have created either 0.5% of your total year-round housing, you get a 1-year safe harbor, or 1.0%, you get a 2-year safe harbor.
I wonder, for lay people watching at home, if you could just say generally what a safe harbor is, what that means.
So I'm actually going to explain a little bit how the process works for claiming a safe harbor. But basically, if a town is able to successfully assert a safe harbor, then you can either deny or condition a comprehensive permit, and it will absolutely be upheld if there were an appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee.
Okay, thanks.
It's an automatic approval. It doesn't matter, where otherwise it would have been rejected. In this instance, because you have a valid safe harbor claim, you can pretty much put almost any sort of condition on it you want, and it wouldn't be a problem. Or you could just reject it outright, and it would automatically be upheld.
Okay.
So in addition to the housing production plan, there's recent progress, which is if in the 12 months prior to an application, the town has approved 2% of its total housing as affordable. There's also a large project exemption, and based upon the size of a municipality, there's a threshold limit in which the town doesn't have to approve more units. And then there's also the related application provision. So if an applicant comes in and seeks some sort of a non-affordable housing project on a site and doesn't get the permitting that they're looking for, they can't use it to come back and do a spite 40B application until at least a year has passed since that other application has been completed. So just, I want to. All right, so there are some important threshold days, and that's what I wanted to talk about on the safe harbor. Once a 40B application has been submitted, and a lot of this has already gone past, so don't really need to belabor it too much, but within 7 days should be distributed to all boards and committees in town that would be providing any sort of input in the process. Notice of public hearing should be published 14 days prior to the hearing. Public hearing has to open within 30 days of the filing of the application. And then safe harbor notification. So this basically starts tonight. 15 days from the date of the opening of the public hearing, the board has to notify the applicant if any one of the safe harbors is applicable. And if the board doesn't notice formally in writing to the applicant that they have a safe harbor, then at the end of the process, you can't raise it, even though you had a valid claim. Presuming that there was a safe harbor notification, then there's a right to take an interlocutory appeal first to DHCD, and then if DHCD issues a determination that either the board or the applicant disagrees with, then you can take an appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee. 180 days from the opening of the public hearing, the board needs to close the public hearing. And then 40 days from the close of the public hearing, you have to actually submit your decision to the town clerk. Once the decision has been issued, you have, the applicant has 20 days to file an appeal, or abutters have 20 days to file an appeal to the trial courts. So 40B application submission requirements. It's important to recognize that what is submitted are preliminary plans rather than final development plans. They're required to submit existing site conditions and a locus map, preliminary scaled architectural drawings, a tabulation of proposed buildings by type, size, and ground coverage. I'm not really sure why the regulations require this. I've never really seen it be all that helpful, but it's in there. If a subdivision is proposed, a preliminary subdivision plan should be submitted. A preliminary utilities plan should be submitted, and a list of requested waivers. And we'll probably get to that at some point tonight on the waivers. Site visit, I don't know if it's the typical practice of this board to conduct site visits on applications, but it definitely is something that can be done. The biggest thing that needs to be kept in mind is that it's not a public hearing in the sense that you're not taking testimony either from the applicant or from abutters to the project. The only sort of information that can be taken is locational. This is where, the site driveway will be. This is where the proposed units are going to be. You might want to do a balloon test to check the height of proposed buildings. You can point out there's the balloon, that's how high it's going to be.
Right.
But other than that, you can't have any sort of substantive discussions. Peer review consultants, a very important part of the process, and it's something that needs to be taken care of, right at the beginning of the process, because again, you have a very short time. 180 days seems like it's a long time, but it goes by really quickly in these applications. So you're allowed to do peer review, civil engineering, traffic, architecture, and in appropriate circumstances, financial peer review. But the regulations only allow the financial peer review to be done at the end of the process, after all other peer review has been completed, and after the applicant has been given a proposed set of conditions and waiver decisions, because otherwise there's no really measuring whether conditions are going to render a project uneconomic unless they've been presented that.
Right.
All written results and reports are to be made part of the record. And review of studies have to be those that are prepared on behalf of the applicant. The board cannot charge peer review to conduct its own reviews. So it all has to be reviews of information submitted by the applicants. So at the end of the day, what the board really needs to be looking at is issues of local concerns. So the issues that boards are allowed to address in their decisions are health, safety, environmental, design, open space, planning, and other local concerns. And those have to be balanced against the regional need for affordable housing. So that's the standard that will be applied if any sort of appeal of your decision is taken on an approval with conditions. And actually on a denial, it'll be the same thing. It'll be they'll look at all of these issues and determine first whether or not there is a legitimate local concern, and if there is a legitimate local concern, whether it outweighs the regional need for affordable housing. The standard is pretty high. It's not often that boards are able to have their decisions upheld if they're conditioning a project to an extent that they're rendering uneconomic, or if they're denying a project.
Okay.
So again, the board has three decisions. When it issues a comprehensive permit decision, it can deny the comprehensive permit. It can approve the comprehensive permit as submitted. I literally have never seen that happen. Or it can approve with conditions, and that's the most frequent outcome of an application. So again, approval with conditions. The conditions should not render the project uneconomic. My suggestion is that the board really shouldn't consider too closely the economic impact of its conditions, and instead should focus on the local concern aspect of its conditions. If you're imposing a condition on a project, take a look at whether or not it's really necessary to address a legitimate issue of local concern. And if it's not, then it may be something that is beyond what you should be imposing. Conditions and requirements need to be consistent with local needs. And then finally, there's a provision in the regulations that says a board cannot reduce the number of units for reasons other than evidence of local concerns within the board's purview, which again means you should be taking a look at the local concerns first and foremost, and be less concerned about what the economic impacts are. Managing the comprehensive permit, this is really a lot of post-permit stuff. I tell boards very frequently, and much to their chagrin, that even when you get through the hearing process, you're not actually done. I think you've seen this with the point. They have come back and requested modifications. I heard that there was an approval for a peer review on the point, and that's been, 4 years at least since that decision was issued.
Yeah.
So you know that it's not something that really goes away. An applicant is required to get final approval from the subsidizing agency at the end of the process. So at the beginning of the process, they're required to get a project eligibility letter, which I went through this application, and they got one, through the LIP program from DHCD. They'll be required to go back to DHCD at the end of the process. DHCD will take a second look at the project as approved by the board, make sure it meets all of their requirements, and then they issue final approval. Part of that final approval will have regulatory agreement executed, deed riders, monitoring services agreement. It'll look at and approve the affirmative fair housing marketing plan. This is going to be the requirement for income, asset, first-time buyer status, or in this case, it's going to be renter status. There's also provisions for the lapse of a comprehensive permit. So the DHCD regulations allow the board to have a comprehensive permit lapse if substantial construction has not commenced within 3 years. That can be extended, and that extension is presumed to be insubstantial. So as long as there is an extension request filed before the expiration of the permit, it's probably going to be allowed. Transfer of the comprehensive permit is not something that's within the jurisdiction of the board. That's exclusively within the scope of the subsidizing agency to approve the transfer of the permit to a different entity. The board does have the right to get notification of that. And then inspections during just construction, again, it's similar to any other large-scale project you're going to see in town. You can retain peer review consultants to the extent that there's not enough in-house capacity to do that sort of thing. So that's a really quick rundown. I think I probably should cover the waivers and sort of that approach to the process. So Chapter 40B allows for the submittal of a single comprehensive permit. What that means is that the Board of Appeals sits in the shoes of all other local boards as part of this process. So to the extent that you have a local wetlands bylaw, you're issuing the permit under the local wetlands bylaw. If you have a local Title V regulations, you're issuing permits under Title V. Other boards retain their jurisdiction when they're applying state permits, right? So the Title V permit is issued by the Board of Health. The order of conditions under the Wetlands Protection Act is issued still by the Conservation Commission. It's only the local aspects of those permits that you would step in the seat of those boards. You have the right to grant waivers of local rules and requirements, and essentially, to the extent that failing to grant those waivers would render a project uneconomic, you're really under an obligation to grant those waivers. One place where I would note an exception, and I noticed that there was sort of some blanket waiver requests of local fees. My experience, I'm not aware of any Housing Appeals Committee decisions in which local fees were required to be waived in order to make a project economic. I know that in the Point, there were some sewer fees that were waived as part of a trade-off in terms of some work that was going to be done by the applicant on the sewer. The Housing Appeals Committee has a policy where they like to see some sort of consideration being given by a board in terms of the affordable nature of the project and waiver of fees to the extent that the board feels is necessary, but it's not an absolute requirement that you do so. And that pretty much is the bare bones 40B overview. Any questions?
Yeah. Madam Chair, do you mind if we ask some questions?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. That was a great presentation. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm relatively new to the ZBA. So if I understand correctly, a safe harbor situation is one where a city or town already has sufficient low-income housing so as to allow it more leeway in conditioning a proposal or rejecting a proposal. Is that about right?
That is. So the way the safe harbor process works, and again, there are different types. There are safe harbors that are mentioned in the Chapter 40B statute, and then there are safe harbors that are mentioned in the DHCD regulations. But the way the process works is the same for both. If the town has identified any area in which a safe harbor is applicable, then it's required to provide notice to the applicant within 15 days of the opening of the public hearing. And once that notice has been issued, presuming there's no appeal, the board still can go through its process, issue a decision, and that decision is basically appeal-proof on the applicant's part.
And is this board charged with determining whether Shrewsbury is asserting a safe harbor? Has that process already taken place? I'm a little unclear on that.
So essentially, the planning board has provided a preliminary overview of the safe harbor thresholds that were mentioned and did find at this time that we're not meeting them, but could continue the review of it if the board is looking for them, I guess.
Okay.
Is there any more to add on that?
No, but again, the notification would have to come 15 days from tonight, and it'd have to be in writing.
Okay. All right, thank you. Those were my questions.
Okay.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Rowan, anything else to add?
No, not at this time. I'll jump in.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that. That's very helpful.
You're very welcome.
Okay, without further ado, Chris, is that correct?
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
Welcome.
so thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, members of the ZBA. I appreciate the time and review of our application here. What we're looking to achieve today as we kick off this process is not to add any new technical information, but really just give you context of the project, how we're thinking about it. There are some operational nuances to this that you may have seen in the application with respect to the programmatic operations of the community and an age restriction at 55 plus. So we want to just highlight that and speak about what exactly this proposed project is, and we wanted to put a face to the various components of the comprehensive permit application. So I'm joined today by a couple of members of our team. So Karen Kepler is with Sullivan and Worcester. She is our land use attorney. We have Christopher Kurland with TAT, the architecture team. He's the designer of the building. and we have Phil Cordero from Allen and Major. So at various points in the presentation, I may, if it's okay, ask them to just come up and say a couple of words about themselves, their experience, and their components of the presentation. So what we're looking to cover today will be the items in this table of contents here. So I will try to move quickly. One of the items that I did want to go through was an overview of the 40B process. So Mr. Haverty, thank you. You did a much better job than I could on that. So I will gloss over that piece. And really what we're trying to do is just what I described here. So an overview of the project, make sure that we're all in agreement or understanding of how we're thinking of this proposed project, and providing the full context of the application, an introduction of ourselves, our various respective work experiences in the Commonwealth. And then we will talk about the site plan. Again, it's not any new technical information, but we'd like to walk through the various components that we think are important about the site plan and the building architectural design. And then what I'd love to do at the conclusion would be to have a discussion about some of those peer reviews and other processes that are the roadmap ahead, because we'd love to be as as helpful as we can in kicking those off and making sure that all reviews, because there's a lot of technical content obviously that need to get done, that we're facilitating that and making sure that we can have a good sense of where we go next in the process. So an overview of the project. This site is located at 409 South Street. We have a couple of aerials here, hopefully visible. Sorry, they're a little bit small on the screens here, but the site is at the corner of South Street and Route 20, or the Hartford Turnpike. It's nestled in between Route 20, the UMass campus, Charles River Labs, and across from South Street from the Centec Park. So currently the property is owned by a family. It's been owned by this family for a number of generations now, and it has a couple of abandoned barns and has a history of some agricultural use, but today is largely not in use for for any commercial or residential purposes. So what we're proposing is a project that we have named Album Shrewsbury. This project would be 196 units of rental apartments. It is a 55-plus age-restricted community, so you'll hear me use the phrase active adult a lot. That is a phrase that it's probably not trademarked by Graystar, I don't think, but it is something that we have pioneered and that we've been a national leader in. So we'll talk a little bit more on exactly what active adult means, because we think that the way that we view it and operate it is different from a lot of 55-plus, just simple deed-restricted and nothing else communities. And per the 40B regulations, we will be setting aside 25% of units in the project as designated affordable in perpetuity. These would be affordable at 80% of AMI. So some of the project highlights and elements that I'd like to go over here. This project started with a review of the just the regional demographics, and like many other communities, Shrewsbury we feel is grappling with rapidly increasing cost of home ownership and specifically a lack of quality rental alternative options for aging residents. So it is not a Shrewsbury specific issue. I think anyone who lives in Massachusetts or frankly in most parts of the country right now are feeling that pressure of home ownership and just the lack of available housing alternates that are just a reality of where we are today. So we spent some time reviewing the Shrewsbury Master Plan and the Housing Production Plan. I do want to say we commend the town for having a thoughtful approach to how to approach housing production and addressing affordable and market rate rental housing options for senior members of the community. Not all towns have such a well thought out vision of how to just tackle the very serious issue at hand. So that we thought that there was a really clear alignment of what our goals are as a producer and developer of housing in the region, and specifically to have an opportunity to deliver a age-restricted, senior-oriented housing community. It felt like a really natural fit here. So, gone down the process of obviously designing and preparing the project plans that we've submitted. So the project will, I think I hit on this, has 25% affordable units, so that equates to 49 total units, affordable based on 80% of area median income. All of the units, the 196 units, just because of how 40B works, and please feel free to correct me if I misstate anything technical about 40B, but all of the 196 units would count towards the subsidized housing inventory in Shrewsbury, right? So it's not just the 49 units, it would be the full 196 units, which would help, and that would be advancing towards some of the safe harbor protections. So the age-restricted community, so this 55-plus community, it will be deed restricted. We will be leasing the units exclusively to residents who meet that 55-plus criteria. And so because of that, when we look at the, I would say, municipal burden or municipal impacts, we obviously look at just the sort of technical impacts of traffic, noise generation, light generation, things of that nature. But we also have prepared a financial or fiscal impact analysis that looks at projected tax revenue. And because of the 55-plus nature of this property, the residents, just by nature of where they are in life and what their daily activities look like and what their at-home, I would say, family composition looks like, there generally is a lighter impact on municipal services, schools probably being the most significant when you compare to a conventional apartment building. Let's see here. And yeah, so those are just some of the highlights we want to go through on the project. 40B overview. I will skip this. I think if there are any questions about the 40B, maybe we can come back to that at the end in the Q&A section. To put some context to the income restrictions that we are referring to here when we talk about 80% of AMI, because I know most people don't have AMI tables memorized. The various income limits that 80% of AMI represents in this area would be represented in the table here on the top right. So for those who maybe can't read it easily here, a household of one person has a 80% AMI income of $61,900. Two persons would be $70,750. Three people, $79,600, and four people has a area median income of $88,400. So to comply with affordability at those income levels, these are prescriptive affordable rents. We don't set them. They are set, I believe, by DHCD. So the current 2022 affordable rent limits for those various income brackets based on the unit type would be somewhere in the $1,400 to $1,800 a month. So I will now go into the project stakeholders. So the town, first and foremost, where we are in the process, is we have worked through a local initiative program, or a LIP application, to DHCD. We were co-applicants with the town of Shrewsbury in that application. That was reviewed and approved by DHCD, which is where we are today. We have the project eligibility letter. So first and foremost, among our stakeholder list is the town of Shrewsbury and its residents and members of the community. Graystar, myself, I represent the developer operator, but there's a couple of other hats here, namely general contractor and construction manager. So I'll talk a bit more about sort of our vertical nature, but we will be responsible for upholding many different components of this project. So it is going to be a pretty centralized process in that regard. And then we have the architecture team and Alan and Major here. So Graystar, we are an international real estate company. We do have various vertically integrated elements within our business, but locally, the way that I think of our team is we're a small group. We're based in Boston. We are development professionals who have built our career in Massachusetts, working in the greater Boston area and beyond. And we have the structure and the resources and I would say the stability and capabilities of this national platform that we operate within. So what that means is we do have not just our development team, but we have this construction business. So we will be performing as the general contractor. We will be performing as the community manager, the property manager. So what that means for us is that we can control and really bring the highest level of accountability and surety and quality to the design, to the construction, and to the operations. So it's really important that every project that we do has that Gray Star full package, right? We do not perform, for example, construction for third-party developers, right? It is strictly within our development projects. So in terms of experience and presence in Massachusetts, we currently, as a property manager, manage 49 properties throughout the Commonwealth. And within active adult, I touched on this at the beginning, but we are at the forefront of active development, 55-plus communities, rental 55-plus communities around the country. We have over 50 communities that are 55-plus under development, and that represents nearly 10,000 units. So this has been this has been something that nationally we have recognized as a very, very significant gap in the housing inventory just across the entire country, and we've set out to address that, and we've done it successfully at pretty significant scale. But in doing that, have I think really come up with a very unique playbook on how we accomplish that. So. A couple of project images here. This is an active adult community that we developed in Barnstable, Massachusetts. So this was completed a couple of years ago. Not that all of our communities are identical. You'll see, and we've got a sneak preview of some of the renderings here. They're obviously different and designed uniquely for each property, but just to give a sense of the offerings here and the type of community that we develop. These are just some photos of the common areas, which is a very significant portion of how we provide the active adult programs here. We really focus on bringing activities and programs and connectivity through the common areas rather than expecting the residents to sort of forge that on their own within the confines of their units. So this is an example of actually this month's programmatic calendar for that property in Cape Cod. So just to give you a sense here of what I mean when I talk about active adult and sort of our unique way of programming these communities, we do not provide healthcare services. This is not assisted living. This is not a nursing facility. These are all entirely independent residents. What we offer is a facilitation of community engagement and community building. So if you look through the types of activities that we offer, it's things like strength and balance. I'm just looking through, just sort of starting at the top left here. So breakfast club, nature club, movie, a movie event, wine raffle ticket. I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds fun. Strength and balance, pickleball, poker, breakfast club, nitwits, game night. So that's just Sunday through Monday, right? First 3 days of this calendar month. So these are all offered to all the residents. There is no charge to attend the events that we host on our properties. It is, we find, a very successful way to take residents who are moving from a certain lifestyle, whether it be focused on career and active involvement in the workforce, or maybe more family-centric living, but at any rate, oftentimes a significant shift in day-to-day lifestyle, And oftentimes we think that, for mental and physical wellness, an important thing to provide is a sense of community and connectivity and activity, right? As people figure out, what exactly does that next step look like. So pairing the rental structure and sort of non-committal financially nature of that, along with this community building, common area, common activity type of approach, is what we focus on when we talk about how Greystar manages and operates these projects differently from others. I would challenge any other age restricted community in how they would attempt to foster the same sort of community and engagement. We think that there's a right way to do it, and we think that we've made a lot of progress in figuring that out, and it's been very well received, and that is our plan here, and something that I obviously think is important when we talk about what exactly this project is. It's not just the bricks and sticks, but a huge part of it is just our way of operating these communities. This is another active adult property down in Austin, Texas. So, obviously just a different aesthetic. Just wanted to give a sense that there's a lot of variety here. There's a lot of response to the local resident population, and making sure that the aesthetic and the design intent of the building is synergetic with the community and surrounding context, and what the residents ultimately want. So if I could, I'll invite up Phil here if you want to speak for maybe a couple of minutes here about Allen and Major and your work, and then we'll do the same for TAT and go to the site plan.
Sure. For the record, good evening. Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates. Happy to be here with the board this evening. Chris gave a great overview. We'll bring to the table sort of our experience in site planning and development. We have done thousands of residential units in Massachusetts. We've done hundreds of units of adult senior living, distributed across multiple projects all over Massachusetts, Metro West, Worcester regional area. We've done many on the South Shore. I operate as the branch manager for our Lakeville, Massachusetts office. We have secondary offices in Woburn and also Manchester, so we have regional placement across the state and into New Hampshire. A team of professional civil engineers, registered landscape architects, professional land surveyors, so we will bring all of those services to the table. So as we are working with the board, and as we are working most notably with your technical consultants and department staff, the town engineer, sewer and water commissioners, I think that's where we'll do most of our work, kind of behind those scenes. We do support green initiatives. We do understand the senior housing product, given our experience with it. So we have partnered up, obviously, with Greystar in this fashion, partner in that we are a consultant to them to provide design services, but we have a really strong understanding as to the specific challenges on senior development campuses, which we'll talk about this evening. And I'm happy to talk about, who we are, what we do in greater detail if the board is interested, but we're certainly excited to present this information to you. I think we have, just like Chris had presented for Greystar, very simply sample projects. They're in our portfolio. We're happy to share any more if you want to learn more about our qualifications. Benchmark Senior Living, this is in Woburn. And we have one Brightview in Concord, which is in Billerica. We have many projects still under permitting and others under construction. These are just some of the newer ones that we have completed in recent years. I think these are 2 or 3 years old now, but we're quite proud of these, and obviously this project to come. So we look forward to discussing the project in a few minutes after the introduction. So I'll step away and.
Thanks, Phil.
Sure.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me and us all together. My name is Christopher Crones. I am with TAT, the architectural team.
You said next zero, yep.
So who we are a largest firm. We have about 95 employees. We have over 200 design awards with over 200,000 residential units that we've delivered to date so far. A large portion of those projects have been both senior housing in some form, and it includes some form of LIP, be it a comprehensive permit or any other means of inclusionary housing. So we as TAT, we like to design spaces that embrace the residents themselves, and we, as Chris said earlier, we design based off the environment, the context, etc. So there's not one specific project that's the same. We have designed, our idea for 55 plus is we like to design spaces that are just not a place, not just a place to age in place, but to age well. So we try to really embrace the residents themselves and design spaces that they really just want to be a part of and actually feel like home when they're leaving their home to come to these places. For these 55 pluses, we'd like to allow residents the opportunity to engage in for opportunities for engagement and socialization. A lot of our typical residents are looking to downsize without compromising. So they're very much set in their ways, what they're looking to have, their amenities they're used to having, the spaces and the interaction with their friends and their peer group. So just a few different projects that we have here. This is one Wingate. Just kind of shows, again, we try to design differently based on the environment they're in. And again, we really try to focus on the interior spaces and just the amenities overall, because that is what the residents and people really want to look forward to other than just their unit themselves. Here's another project here at Westport, Connecticut. And all right, we'll go back to that one. And I'll talk a lot more about the design itself and where we kind of came up with and the materials and et cetera when we get to that portion. Thank you.
Thanks, Christopher. Thank you for allowing us to go through all the introductions here and context of the project. The piece that we'd like to conclude here with is a review of our site plan. Phil, if you want to give just a narrative of the various elements here. I think that the longer you look at it and layering in Phil's explanation and commentary of all the various elements of the design, I think hopefully it will convey the amount of thought and iterations that we've gone through here. We've gone through a number of tweaks and changes and concepts in response to the generous feedback we've gotten from the town's various departments. Phil, I'll let you take it away and just explain how we got to where we are today.
Thank you very much. So just to get into the specifics of the project, I'd like to start with this overview slide. You saw it at the beginning of the presentation, and for the benefit of the public, just so you can see what that looks like. What I want to identify for the board is our project site, which is highlighted in red. It's Russell Mills Farm, which is at the corner of Chestnut Street and South Street. Thank you, Chris. And now you see it on the screen for the benefit of the public behind us. Russell Mills has been activated in terms of farming, different levels of agriculture, as Chris had pointed out. But in terms of starting the development of the site, what we have to look at as site engineers is, what are we given as existing conditions? And there are two notable features here that drove the bus in terms of what we put together for our site planning. The first that is clearly visible on the image on the right is the front half of the site has been farmed. That land has been cleared. So the area in, blue on the screen is about 14.7 acres. So the front 5 of it, or 5 to 6 of it, has already been disturbed. Denuded of trees, it's been stripped, the loam has been removed. The other element not readily visible on this particular plan, the horizontal view, is there's 80 feet of grade change from Chestnut Street down to the back of the site where there's a wetland resource area. Basically, at the inset to the property line off of Route 20 is, let's see if I can, thank you. Oh, doesn't work on the screen, but right in there. Thank you, Chris. That's our wetland area. So we have about 80 feet of grade change in there. So there's a lot to navigate in terms of site development. So what we were able to do, sorry.
No, please.
And this image that's now on the screen is focused on the front half of the site, is to focus the campus-style development on the area that has previously been altered. And that's an approach to preserve the landscape as we have it, preserve as much of the tree cover as is out there as much as possible. So it's not 100% ratio. We obviously have to clear some trees in support of this project, but a concerted effort was made to keep this project centered over the land that was previously developed and avoid additional alteration. So we're at about 50% of the land. So 50% of it, as shown on this plan on the screen, is the development area. The other 50% will remain entirely natural. And what we've done too is by focusing this away, the wetland resource area that is down at the bottom of the hill, we have respected that not only in its entirety that there's no alteration, we are well outside of a 100-foot jurisdictional buffer for the local Conservation Commission and Mass DEP. So we've made sure those environmental hallmarks stay in place.
Can I
And
just
we've-
ask a quick question
Yes.
about that? Did you do your own wetland delineation? Did you rely on Mass DEP mapping?
We did our own wetland delineation.
Okay.
So we send out certified wetland scientists to walk the land and physically flag those. So if you look on the site plans that were part of the application, on the existing conditions plan, the specific flag locations that they identified are there for you.
Okay,
So it's exact to the property.
Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with that in play, we've located the campus towards the front of the site. But at the same time, we've focused our development so we can meet the desired setbacks of the local bylaw. You have 50-foot setbacks from front, side, and rear yards. Clearly, we're several hundred feet away from the rear yard, but we're greater than 50 feet for front, side, and rear, which is what you would otherwise allow under the code. So if you start to imagine some of those boxes being drawn on a plan, it really told us where this site plan wanted to exist, and that's where we landed. Then when you take the vertical elements into play, with the site dropping down significantly in the back, the further we drive the site to the rear, the further we drive the development towards the rear of the site, the worse the topography gets, and it leads to increased amounts of construction, modified earth fill, etc. So by focusing it again to the front, we're able to utilize the land area that's currently farmed and then create the terracing for this project. Now again, what's not readily visible from our site plan is, and if I may, and it'll become more apparent with the architectural, is because the grade change drops following the cursor from Chestnut Street down to the rear of the property, this certainly spoke to an opportunity to have a multi-level building, meaning we would have a shorter height on the front on Chestnut Street, and then as the grade drops towards the back, it reveals itself. So the front half is a 4-story, while the back lower half is a 5-story building. And we're using the grade to accomplish those. Now, we do still have earthwork. We'll review this, obviously, with your peer review consultant. We'll review this with the town engineer. The earthwork is necessary to create the level terraced areas, but also to provide accessibility around the entirety of the site. It is a senior campus. We want to make sure that it is ADA compliant and accessible, or otherwise accommodations have been made. So it's just some quick metrics, and we can get into further detail at the pleasure of the board as we go through this lengthy process. Our main entrance will be off of Chestnut Street, fully accommodatable for emergency vehicles, meets sightline distance requirements. It's been analyzed, it's in the program. We have an entry that brings you to the front of our building, the main door, the focal point that we'll talk about architecturally. Flanking it on either side will be parking trays, parking areas accommodatable for the residents of the album, and then circumnavigating the campus roadway that wraps around the entirety of the building, again with parking spaces. Now on the parking, under the Town of Shrewsbury zoning code, you would require 2 parking spaces per unit. We have 196 units. That would put us at 392. Based on empirical evidence, the operator, their particular experience, our experience, the traffic consultant, the architect, we are proposing 255 spaces, so much less than zoning would otherwise require, and that's based on the preferential need for this type of resident. So it's about 1.3 spaces per residential unit as opposed to 2. So all of that in total goes to the consolidation, not having excess parking, not creating those enormous parking fields that you might see elsewhere that just remain empty all of the time. And again, it helps us to focus those efforts on the property. Around the perimeter, we do have the yellow buildings are detached amenity-spaced garages. So they're obviously upgrade spaces for the residents, but they accomplish 2 things. So one is covered parking that Greystar will own and operate for the residents. For us, they create visual breakage along the property line. They create buffers to adjoining roadways and/or properties. So you'll see them aligned on the outer edge of the property. We're on the inside of the campus. Those buildings may align on the outside. It creates a transitional element from garage structures, which will only be 14 to 15 feet in height, to a building centrally located that is obviously much higher than that, but those garages will be what you may be accustomed to seeing and feeling in your own backyard in terms of their overall height, or residential properties within the town of Shrewsbury. So again, all of those elements that we wanted to put on here drove this layout in place. The last thing that you'll see is interior to the wings of the building is a very large amenity-based courtyard. It is still to be programmed. We will work through that as the project advances through this permitting and ultimately through design. Likely to include outdoor sitting space, quiet space, potential gardening areas, some sort of maybe pickleball court, shuffleball court, certainly heavily landscaped, certainly decoratively paved with hardscapes and furnishings. The plan that you see shows a pool, certainly a pool with lounging area around it. Again, space to be worked out, but it's available for all of the residents on the property. It's connected to all points of the building, and we will believe it'll be a strong focal point to this site. The other part of it that you'll notice in terms of the angle of the building, the two wings that sort of splay out with the courtyard in between, is given where this building will lie on the high side, closest to Chestnut Street, and as the grade continues to drop down, that will be a vista view looking out towards the rear of the Russell Farm property, that additional 7.5 acres that will remain untouched. Forested land, the wetlands down at the base, you'll be able to see beyond that. It affords the opportunity to see that and also take advantage of it from an amenity base for walking trails, nature hikes, unstructured mobility for the residents that are able to do it, so they can walk through the woods, go down to the stream that goes through the culvert that goes underneath Route 20 at the end of the day. And I think all of those come together as part of the site planning package. The areas that you see outside of here, the lighter green spaces ringed by the clamshell, those are areas that we have to modify to construct this, to create the level landing for the site. Those are areas of sloping and terracing. They're on the outsides, the backsides. They will be landscaped, they will be seeded, they'll be allowed to grow and naturalize as necessary, allowed to blend into the environment, but really be on the backside and out of sight. Last thing I'll just touch upon very quickly, because I know we have a lot to go through here tonight, but then subsequent hearings. We have had the opportunity to meet with town staff many times during the LIP process. So we are very much aware of what the town has asked for. They helped drive us in terms of the layout here for infrastructure, proper site design. We've spoken to the town engineer, the DPW director, the fire chief, the police chief, the town administration, the town planner. We've heard those comments. Those comments are all reflected in the package that is in front of you in terms of what the town wanted to see. We know additional comments will be coming, and we have a staff report that we received that has some additional needs to be reflected on the site plan. We'll get to all those and make sure we provide answers to all of those questions that were raised. Things like life safety accommodation and fire hydrants, all typical questions that if we didn't give you enough information up front, happy to provide it as we go through the process, and we're confident in our ability to do that. Do you want to move to architecture?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
please. That would be
All right, so I'll be available for questions as we go through the evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, so we'll talk a bit, or I'll let Christopher here talk a bit about the design of the project that we're very excited about.
Thank you again. So if you look at the renderings we have up on the screens over here, our goal for this project itself was to break up the massings along each facade. And as you can see, as Phil showed out earlier, in the site plan itself, the green space is the center of the design. The whole point is we want the building to wrap around it and really engage that and kind of create that serenity space for whatever they're doing inside there. So we have all the community activity spaces that are centrally located once you come off into the building. We decided to use our amenity space as 2 stories from the entry points from the rear and the back to the courtyard to really bring everything together and give that sense of community space, that central gathering space. It also provides for an opportunity for, for engagements with people in general and just having that double-sided space they can kind of see what's going on. The design itself is really just meant to be a contemporary. It's to aim at the active adults. It's supposed to look a little bit more modern. It's supposed to look a little bit more sleek. It's built into the topography itself. So as you see from the front elevation, when you're approaching the site here, it's a 4-story building. But when you get towards the back, it steps down to a 5-story building. It's really kind of embedded within the site itself. As for like the lines itself, as you see the roofs are very sleek, flat lines. We have a flat roof that we're designing here with kind of different pieces popping up, but overall it's to create that nice linearity as you kind of approach the site. And once you see towards the garages that are wrap around, it creates that helps create that sense of scale and a purpose, and just breaks it down and kind of makes it feel a little bit more homed in. We try to maximize the convenience and safety for vehicular and bicycle pedestrian movement throughout the site, as you saw earlier from the site plan. We have minimal ornamentation on here. As you can see, we don't have very much trim, sleek, clean windows, clean lines. We're using materials themselves to differentiate between different areas, pulling them out, pulling them in, and using colors and textures as a way of delineating different parts of the building as you wrap around. We have the residential front door, which is, again, centrally located once you come into the site, and it's set back off, so it's not off the main road itself. The parking, again, dispersed throughout the site, then you have the garages themselves. For materials, we're thinking about a hardy trim, hardy panels of different colors, sizes, textures, patterns, etc. And using storefronts and paneling to really, again, break up the massing where it doesn't feel like a big flat facade. It actually kind of gives that character. And by doing these things and tucking in these balconies, it helps break up that massing and feel more of a human scale to it. And again, gives that sense of privacy and intimacy when you look at all the balconies, how they're kind of tucked in. It gives those residents that sense of home that they're kind of leaving, in a sense. So we really just wanted to focus on making this feel home. And if you look from the courtyard, again, going back, we want to design around the people, the amenities, the spaces. As Chris was saying earlier, active adult. We're targeting people who want to engage with each other in community activities that are provided by Greystar. So if you see in the courtyard here, this is rendering again, concept. But the whole point is a lot of green space, a lot of interactive space, quiet spaces. We will have a pool. We will have a pool. We will have other amenities that we were still kind of working out what we're going to put in the courtyard themselves. But it's really just kind of to create this serene environment, and by enclosing it within the wings of in the back courtyard, one, we're protecting it by the site with the trees, and you're giving those residents that privacy, but it also allows them to kind of have that little community in there itself. The color palette we're looking to do is dark neutral colors with strategic highlights that are only highlighting like nature elements and colors that you find within the environment in the area to kind of blend in. Overall the intent is to maximize the utility of developed and natural site features. We really didn't want to take too much away and really kind of create this man-made environment within the building itself. Other than that, we have one access point from the courtyard. It allows for the loop around the building itself. And there's a lot of pedestrian access ways, walkways, sidewalks, ADA accessible and compliant. And we have a variety of mixes, as you see in the packet that was submitted earlier, of all the different unit types and what we have in there. And I'm happy to answer any more questions you have about the design itself, materials, texture, etc. Later on.
Thanks, Christopher.
So that concludes the presentation that we've prepared tonight. I appreciate all of the time here, and hopefully it wasn't more than that you all have expected, or more time than you anticipated having in the meeting here. There's a lot to cover. We wanted to make sure that you had a good sense of who we are, what the project is, and where we'd like to conclude is first answering any questions that may not have been raised yet. We're happy to stay and answer any questions that you'd like for as long as you'd like. But ultimately, my ask would be that we have also just a discussion or get some feedback on where we go in the process from here, if there's anything that we can do to facilitate in engaging with either peer reviews or providing additional information or follow-up answers. That's really what we're focused on here now is just supporting the town and the ZBA and completing the review that you need to complete. So I'll stop there. Thank you all again for your time and turn it over to you for any questions.
Thank you. Very thorough. Appreciate that. I think I'd like to open up to the board to see if we have any high-level questions that we want to. High level?
Yeah, well, relatively high level, I guess. So I just had a couple questions about, I guess they're design choices, but some of them are sort of site and some of them are maybe architecture, so I guess jump in depending on who. I mentioned there's a lot in the materials about trying to be sort of sensitive to the environment and trying to be efficient, all those kinds of things. I'm noticing there's a lot of roof area there. Was there any consideration of solar panels on the roof?
Yeah, that is something that we'd love to explore. We haven't made any decision around that. There's plenty of rooftop, and we'd love to make good use of it. So it is something that we have engaged with Selco and understanding what options are there.
Great.
And we'd love to run that to ground and explore it if we can.
Okay. Another and kind of related, and to the extent that we would be putting on the Conservation Commission hat, and this, I guess, is probably an Alan and Major question. That really steep down gradient, you mentioned the 80 feet, and the wetland resource at the bottom and the creek at the bottom. As far as runoff, and especially during construction, but also after construction, how do we prevent the siltification of those resources? And is that, there's mention of different swales in here and catch basins and whatnot, but at a high level, is that something that I hope you're taking into account? Yeah.
I hope we have to your satisfaction as well. There is a lot of grade out there, and it needs to, A, be controlled during construction, and B, controlled permanently after construction.
Right.
The after is the easy part. And the after is we have a drainage system on site that will mitigate for any of the runoff that we are creating by the additional pavement, the additional building, et cetera, entirely underground. It's promoting recharge to the groundwater table and then slow release, controlled release to the natural water course, which ultimately feeds the wetlands at the bottom of the hill.
Right.
So that whole back slope area that we mentioned, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in great detail, certain areas of it are stabilized with riprap, with rock, to hold it for stabilization purposes. The other areas are vegetated, so heavily vegetated with an erosion mix, very rooty, very weedy, that grips the soil. So once that takes hold, we're good. And you want to let that grow, and then those roots take over, you'll be good going forward. And that allows that future condition, all that water to continue to run down. The interim condition, the during construction condition,
Right.
That's a little harder. So our initial first pass, we provided an erosion control plan in the package that we'll review with you and your team and whomever you choose, the town engineer. It provides for a multi-layered approach to erosion control. So I'm sure you've seen site plans. We have a hay barrier at the bottom of the hill.
Right.
That's it. And then you get 80 feet above, and you go, well.
Yeah, tidal
So,
wave.
right. So we have multiple hay bale barriers because you want to break up that flow. The biggest thing that you don't want to have happen is water to collect, because once it's moving together, you can't stop it.
Right.
So it's better to stop it at the source than try to stop it at the bottom. So by having the multiple barriers that you'll see on the plans, we can break that up efficiently. The other thing that we will be able to do under construction is the site essentially will be a bowl unto itself. Mm-hmm. And then it will rise up in terms of the finished grade. And that will afford us the opportunity to collect that water runoff before it has a chance to run down all of those slopes, and we release it in a manner that we deem appropriate. And we is everybody in this case. It's the approval documents from the town, it's Greystar is the construction, it's Allen and Majors, the site engineers of record for it, and certainly the contractors, everybody involved on it. So I think the high-level answer is that there's a lot of complexity to it. We have thought it through. It's what you have in front of you are permit drawings that give you our intent. We will be obligated, because of the size of the site, to put together a NEPDES permit and a stormwater pollution prevention plan. It's an absolute, we'll write the condition for you if you're willing to consider it, because it'll be necessary. And that gets submitted as part of the construction documents that tells you how we're going to, in finite detail, control the site, control that water runoff to address that runoff to those back slopes.
Okay, that's very helpful.
High level, right?
I know.
More than you asked.
No, good balance. And this might also be for you.
Sure.
As far as the site plan, I think I understand why you would want to have the entrance to the property be on Chestnut Street as opposed to South Street. But having driven on Chestnut Street many times, it's a pretty narrow, not busy, small street. And this is sort of half question, just half raising a concern. There will be presumably a lot of traffic for active 55-year-olds. Can Chestnut Street handle that? And is there any modifications that need to be made for that?
So I'll answer the first part, which is why Chestnut Street and not South Street. South Street is obviously the busiest street. It's more heavily traveled. It's a more improved roadway. And the answer to that is the grade. South Street is significantly lower than Chestnut Street. So if we wanted to utilize South Street, then this site comes down in elevation.
Right.
And we become an excavation site, a gravel pit, if you will.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of us want that. We're not in the business for a gravel pit. I don't think the town wants to support that. So that's why Chestnut Street works from the site design perspective. In terms of the traffic along Chestnut Street, so you do have a traffic report from GPI.
I saw that.
GPI you're probably very familiar with. They've done a lot of projects in town. They did the Centec Park adjacent, very familiar with these roadways. So their statement of professional certification is that certainly Chestnut Street is adequate to support the traffic. And what I would suggest to you, and I will let them say this in greater detail so I don't misspeak, is the notion of a lot of traffic from a senior development. I think you'll be surprised through the report and through further discussion how little traffic there actually is.
Okay.
In terms of the nature of the residents, in terms of the clientele. And that's one of the selling points, one of the benefits of a project such as this. I think Chris mentioned school system.
Right.
The other is traffic generation. It's significantly lower than what we would call market rate or
Typical apartment building.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And I can contextualize that. I don't mean to paraphrase or say that I have all the numbers in that report finalized, but I think if anyone goes to the bottom line, right, the executive summary, the most important number in the report, it's probably traffic generation during peak hours. So in the AM or PM, that number is somewhere between 25 and 30 trips added to or from the property, to the property in the evening, from the property in the morning. So 25 to 30 vehicles either coming or leaving during peak traffic hours over the course of an hour. So it's every 2 minutes there's a car that's either coming or going, depending on what time of day it is. So now obviously there's a lot more content to that report, but just to give some sense of the kind of generation that GPI is anticipating for new vehicles on the roads.
And can you just, out of curiosity, so 25, what would a typical apartment building be of the same size, if you can guess?
That I can't off the cuff here. Yeah, sure. I don't want to overstate that, but I would say higher than 20.
Higher than 25. Yes. Very helpful.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
With high level tonight, higher than 25.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that's all for me.
Matt?
I think I'm okay. I had the same question with Chestnut Street and why that would be better. So, I'm going to pass for right now.
Okay. Patrick?
I just had one question about why the less parking.
Sure.
1.8.
Yeah. So it
3 to do.
No, but
1.6.
6.
Yeah, so it is that number is related to the unit mix, right? The types of different apartments we'll have at the property. So This property is predominantly one-bedroom units. It has 30% of the units are two-bedroom, but just for this profile of resident, we find that one-bedrooms and smaller format apartments are more in demand. And just with the typical car counts for those units, we don't see utilization above that 1.3 ratio that we have. So it's, I think for different communities, different populations, and different numbers of bedrooms and occupants in the units, you might have a higher parking count per, more cars per household. But for a property that is 70% one-bedroom units, most of these households will skew towards a one car per household.
I'm sure you're taking into account, it's a tough location to walk anywhere, so everyone will be pretty car dependent. Yeah, okay.
Does that take into consideration electric vehicles and EV parking stations and?
That number, yeah, so EV parking stations would be included in that number. We haven't laid out the exact number of EV stations. That is something that we're monitoring constantly, and what we like to do is build out more capacity in our projects than we think we need today, so that the electrical capacity is there. The project may require, just based on EV prevalence today, a certain number of charging stations, but we know that that's going to go up. So that is something that they wouldn't be additional spaces, they would be built-in charging stations to the spaces that we're showing on the plans.
Anne?
So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the waiver request for the minimum front or side or rear, anyway, for the garages. Do you have any renderings of the garages that we could take a look at? I'm having a hard time picturing why that wouldn't be just really intrusive.
Sure.
Yep.
We do not have any renderings of the garages. That's something that we'd be happy to provide. To give some context, they will be, we think, aesthetically attractive garages. These are very, very suburban type of car structures with a an overhead door, siding, cladding that generally matches the aesthetic of the property of the apartment building. But we don't have those rendered out. We'd be happy to provide just some design plans of that, and if a rendering would be helpful, we could do that as well.
Okay, all right. And then with regard to the parking, space depth is an issue, and you're seeking a waiver. Can we talk a little bit more about that? Space depth shall be at least 19 feet for all angle and 90-degree parking, and you're seeking a waiver from that for the parking.
Does it? Yeah, please, if you're.
We have landed on sort of a standardization of 9 by 18 as a parking space. So your local code has the 19 feet, so we're asking for a waiver down to the 1 foot. Again, it's all premised on not requiring more impervious than we need operationally, more stormwater, more coverage, more exposure. And I know it's only a foot, but it adds up.
Okay, yeah.
And
has there been any thought given to more, or to less impervious? Is it all asphalt? Is there any option there?
Within the parking area, or
Yeah.
within? We have not studied, nor have I seen in this type of project a permeable parking product, but I would be happy to look into that. That is not something that we've seen as standard practice on this kind of apartment building, but I think it's something definitely worth looking into.
Thanks.
So, first of all, just congratulations. That was a great introduction. I know that the purpose of this meeting is to just sort of talk about high level. I'm going to use that word a couple times. But certainly the supplemental documents that you provided to us were just really well done, 78 pages of information. There's a lot of stuff in there. So I myself am planning on just sort of breaking it down in my mind into the little pockets that will continue as the meetings progress. The one question I have, which might be obvious to everyone but myself, when you talk about the grand entryway, or I forget what the word grand foyer or grand, I'm just curious, if you could just point out to me where that is in the building.
Sure. So I'll start in the site plan. It would be this area here. This entryway is single story up at the front of the building. It's a little bit difficult to see with the tree here, but you'll see that that's a call it storefront. It's not a retail building, but it's a glass type of facade there. On the back end, what that equates to as the building steps down would be some form of a double height space inside. So at the street level, you're at this upper level, right, coming in. I'm sorry, if it's very clear to me if I can see my mouse. I don't know if it's as clear here at distance, but this upper level of the double height glass facing into the courtyard is the entry level at the front of the building. So as you come in, what we would envision is some form of a interior grand stair double height space that has just a really, really rich double height view out towards the courtyard, towards the hill beyond. So that is we think that the welcome experience is a really big part of these communities. We've implemented a similar type of concept where we're able to with similar sort of geometries, and we find it, it's been really successful. And so we wanted to bring that concept here, and that's what we're referring to there.
So all your traffic kind of goes through that part of the building, or are there separate entrances depending on what wing the unit would be located in?
Yeah, there's separate entrances. So I think one of the benefits of having the parking wrap around the project is that we have the ability to introduce multiple access points so that we're not, and this all goes into the what we think of as smart design for 55 plus. Per code, right, you could have parking and you could have access through the front door, but it's a lot of unnecessary walking and circumnavigating the property. So I think what you'll find here is we have probably more elevators than a conventional property of this size would have. They're located in the wings of the building so that there's very convenient access along the perimeter so that residents can pull up. It's a short walk to the door, it's a short walk to the elevator, it's a short walk to their units.
Got it. Okay. Okay, I think that's the only question I have. Is anybody else? Okay, Rowan, could you give us some recommendation on the peer review?
Yes. So, because of the nature of a comprehensive permit, right, and the board's authority over all local level bylaws, we want to make sure that the board is supported through peer reviewers in your review of all of the waivers and in the plans in general. So essentially what I'm going to ask the board for is a motion to, we can talk a little bit about the work we've already done, the staff's already done to collect peer review quotes and budgets, but also to delegate or designate the power of peer review processing and requesting to the planning department so that we can work behind the scenes to keep it moving. As of now, the planning department and other departments, departmental staff have identified the need for peer review of water and sewer, of traffic, and of civil engineer. So those are the three peer reviewers that we have identified and that I've received budgets for, and they're in your packets. I'd like to pursue partnership with them and potentially reach out to any more if further peer review needs come up over the course of this process. Any questions about peer review processes? Anything to add?
The only thing that I would add is I highly recommend the approach of having staff select the peer review engineers for this process, simply because of the timing. Because otherwise, you would be sending staff out to identify, solicit proposals, and then they would have to come back, present those proposals to you, then go back, and you could be 2 months into the process before you've actually gotten any peer review done, and that's too long. So I highly recommend the approach that Rowan is proposing here.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna need a few motions, if you don't mind.
I was trying to think of what that motion would
So I
sound
have it.
Oh, you have it.
I do.
I did draft it.
I have
Of
it.
course, you amended as needed.
So, can I get a motion to appoint the peer review as recommended by the
Hold on.
staff? Oh,
I'm sorry,
sorry.
maybe an unconventional request here, but I
Yes.
did speak with at least one of our neighboring property owners, and I think they may be here, and to voice their,
So we were going to do public commentary after. Is that fair?
We were going to take this vote on the request first and then open
then
it
do
up
public
to-
feedback.
certainly fine with me,
after.
I just want to make sure that
Thank you.
that
No,
I can
appreciate
hear their
that.
concerns.
Is that fair to?
This can be very brief.
Well, I think, given that we have it here and we're on the route, let's start the motions.
Sure.
Then we can open up to public commentary. Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the peer review as recommended by the staff and to delegate the power to the Planning and Economic Development Department to handle ongoing or additional peer review requests?
So I move to appoint the peer reviewers as recommended by staff and to delegate the power to the Planning and Economic Development Department to handle ongoing or additional peer review requests.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Next, can I have a motion to approve the waiver to only provide 3 hard copies of the application for submission to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a comprehensive permit application?
I move to
And,
approve.
May I just amend one, or suggest one amendment that I did not write in there, that if the board or any board members would like to request hard copies, that they may do so to the applicant if they are amenable, and provide an additional copy as needed, but
Okay. So I move to approve the waiver to only provide 3 hard copies of the application for submission to the zoning board for comprehensive permit application, subject to requests from board members for hard copies as needed.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay.
All right.
So this is a public hearing. If there is anyone that would like to be heard on this matter, I'd welcome you to please step up and
Stay there.
keep your comments brief if you can, but certainly, we want to hear what you have to say, please. And could you please state your name and address for the record?
Sure. I'm Nancy Bradley. I own Dottie Jean's Pet Resort and Daycare Center on Chestnut Street. Chris, thank you for reaching out the other day. I appreciate that. I'm glad I came tonight, got a lot of questions answered. But as you know, I do run a doggy daycare boarding facility. I am now going to have 196 apartments parked next to me. Very concerning. It's getting more and more difficult for us to supply a need to these towns. Dogs are everywhere, and these towns are shutting us down. And so I'm very, very concerned that Jane Doe on a Sunday afternoon in July, laying by her pool, hears my boarding dogs barking. She can't do anything to me because I'm permitted, but she can make my life very difficult. So Chris and I had a discussion. It was very nice, and I appreciate that. I know I can't stop this project, but I do ask that these tenants, not residents, tenants coming in, have to be notified in writing that I exist and that they're going to hear dogs barking, and that if they have a concern, to approach it with the leasing people then, versus moving in and then saying, well, I didn't know there was a dog boarding daycare center right next to me because there are garages blocking me. So they're not going to know that. This way, it gives me something to stand on if they come at me. I can say, yes, you did know that I was here. And I'm happy that they're rentals, not owners. Owners would have been a little bit more difficult. I do have a concern with Chestnut Street has quieted down since the pandemic because the UMass building is not busy anymore. But we have those car trucks coming. Those trucks with those 10, 15 cars, they're doing 45 down Chestnut Street. And that's something to put into consideration with that entrance. You come up south and you turn on, if you're stuck there, you don't get seen because it's up and it's here. And there was a car broken down there today, and that person almost got hit quite a few times. But back to my business, is I've dedicated a lot to this business, and I want to know what I can do to protect myself and how I work. I like having the garages there. It is going to be a buffer, but it's only 50 feet, right? It doesn't have to be 100 feet from the property line. It only has to be 50, right?
You mean the building, yeah.
The garages.
So that, I'm not sure, yeah.
Chris, did you address that? And could you show us on the site map where, yes,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
there's the,
Okay.
I do not have this dimension on hand, but would be happy to follow up with that.
Well, it's in the plans.
is that on the,
Yes,
Like
please.
5 feet.
Closer to 50
It's
feet,
50
sure.
feet, right?
Yeah.
No.
No.
No, no.
No, no, no,
I
no.
mean, it's right on the
No.
property there.
I think the applicant should,
If I may, I'll step
Yeah.
up here, excuse me, ma'am. If I may, just to close the loop, so the garages along the shared property line in this area are generally 25 feet off of the property line through here. They do get tight at the corner of the property. This is where that waiver really comes in, and this is our closest point, that 6-foot reduced dimension is here versus about 25 along that line, along the daycare line.
yeah, and we have it in our packet here, the garage A, that one on the southwest there is 24 feet, and the closest one is 5 feet 8 inches at the very back corner of your lot. And I wonder too,
Because what
and
would that, down the line, and that's a leach field too. So it's abutting a leach field. What is, so if I try to expand that building and change that, having that so close, what does that do for me? If he's parked right in my corner? You know, I just,
well, I
Question, I assume that these units are going to be pet-friendly. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
yeah, they will be pet friendly, but that doesn't mean everyone's gonna like being next door to a daycare center. We are a boarding, we are there on the weekends. Our daycare is not open on the weekends, just boarding. So there will be noise, and I like the fact, like I said, there is that buffer, everything's on the inside. The other problem we do have is we have the big UMass building next to me. So when those dogs bark, when there's no trees, it's like an echo chamber. It could be 2 dogs barking, and it echoes off of that building. And I'm hoping that now having the garages and the building and everything inside there will help them not hear that. But it's just, that's just my concern.
Madam Chair, I wonder if I might piggyback on that with some questions that the answers might actually assuage some of your fears about this. So and this is directed at you all, the applicants. The plan also shows, well, so I'll start with the garages. You said they would probably be around 12, 13 feet high. There's a space behind those, and then there's what appears to be a vegetative barrier, at least on this plan, the sort of
It's
rounded
trees.
line there. Is it possible, is it a thing that's ever done to put in vegetation that, I don't know, grows quickly and tall, like arborvitae or something like that, to serve as a kind of sound barrier or something like that? Or I'm just curious.
Yes. So part of our process is to do a acoustical survey of the site. So we're in the process of commencing that now. There is other ambient noise that we're sensitive to. So the UMass facility,
Right.
Route 20,
Certainly.
you know, there is absolutely ambient noise coming from that roadway. It's not a foreign concept to us. We build in urban environments. We build in, we've built in very loud urban environments. And so that acoustical survey allows us to determine what are the right measures. And it varies around the building, right? So those units that are facing Ms. Bradley's property may have perhaps it's augmented sound resilience in the windows, right, and in the skin, right. But in the courtyard space, maybe it's a different measure just based on how the sound is traveling. So we haven't done that survey yet. That is something we're in the process of doing. I would say that our interests are certainly aligned. I don't want disgruntled or disappointed or surprised residents. So we think that the first line of defense is smart design. And making sure that we understand the environment, we have the data, we work with the right teams to help us determine what that specification is. And sometimes it is modifications of landscaping or other built sound barriers if they're necessary.
Yeah, but just, I mean, for me, knowing that that's part of your process and that's underway is helpful.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and I know that Board of Selectmen has talked extensively about you being so close to this, so you're on the radar. And keep coming to the meetings because we need to hear this.
Thank you.
I do see a business opportunity with 196 55 and over people.
Well, my
So maybe you
daycare's
want to
closed. We're not
expand?
taking in any new daycare dogs.
Oh, that's too bad. Maybe
Sorry.
more space.
If I can
I don't
expand,
know.
maybe. But, no, I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate all the information. I mean, it really clarified what I had envisioned in my head going in next door. So I think that it will work out. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
Thank you for attending, Nancy.
Chair, could we take a couple minutes?
Please.
David Singer, 400 South Street. I abut the property directly across the street. As you come up South Street with the third house, we abut also the Allen Farm property, which I refuse to call Centec North.
Sorry.
Nancy's been an awesome business around. She's great. She's quiet. She helped us rescue a dog one day. So we're here also to support her as a neighbor, but also to address the concerns that we already have as far as safety, traffic. Rowan, I appreciate the email reply today. I believe the zoning board, did all members get a copy of the picture of the
It
accidents?
is all in your files under
Yes,
a
it
butter
must be new.
comments.
Okay.
So this is we've been in this property. We lived at 400 South Street for 30 years now. We've seen it grow from cows next door to warehouse facilities to now 196 unit complex. We understand where we live in town. It's a very industrious area. Our home is actually zoned in a limited industrial area. So as we sit through here, I wondered what rezoning, whatever the zoning is, whether it's agricultural, limited industrial, to make this residential, how will that affect us? Can we then get into a residentially zoned area and protect us from certain future developments? So that would be kind of one question I have. The pictures that I sent to Rowan that's in your files, it was a picture of a car that came careening down South Street through our front property, down our driveway, and hit the back of my wife's car. Fortunately, nobody was hurt in this incident. One of the things that we have here in issues of local concerns being health, safety, and other things, if I was standing at the wrong place at the wrong time, I would have been dead. That's a pretty serious health issue. And it's something that we really needed to concern. We have the warehouses that are going up with unforeseen truck traffic that's going to be coming down this road. We have, if anybody's familiar with my property, we've put some barriers, some rock barriers that are constantly getting hit. I lose count of the hubcaps and the car parts and the little pieces of glass. There's trash that people, they come around the corner, they throw their trash onto the street. It's a very dangerous area. I also would have future concerns as to the development of this area with South Street. Talk about a narrow road. This is an extremely narrow, dangerous road where there's no speed limit on the road, whatever the restrictions are between Route 9 and Route 20. This town, from what I understand, has no real say as to what happens on that street. So I would be concerned as to, would development on South Street fall under the complete street guidelines that are in place? And if so, I don't really see how that's going to happen because it's such a narrow street as it is. If you were to take frontage from our property, any sidewalk that would go in there would go practically through our front porch. So we'd be very concerned about complete streets here. Also, if you do complete streets, you've got 196 residents. It's a dangerous place to be walking. It's a dangerous place to be driving. I pleaded with the planning board as the process for the Centec, for the Allen Farm property, to please do a traffic review at the Chestnut Street and South Street area. That was not done. All the traffic reviews came back, intersections, Route 9, South Street, Route 20, South Street, other places. And as I pleaded to the board, most accidents, as proven in our house, don't happen at the intersections. They happen in between. On Route 20, they happen at Dunkin' Donuts. They happen at all the ins and outs. This is a very dangerous, high-speed area as well. So I really have a lot of concerns with the increased traffic. It might be 25 or 30 projected trips from the residents in the morning and afternoon, but certainly they have family. And if they're elderly, there are going to be a lot of visits from their kids. There's going to be a lot of extra traffic coming to visit throughout the day. So we have concern on that as well. Beyond the accident in the property that we sent you to, 3 days prior to that, on a construction detail when they were laying down the sewerage for the Allen Farm property. There was a detour on the road. There was an officer detail directing people. I'm not really sure what happened. My wife was in the car at the time. Gentleman in the front car is talking to the officer. Gentleman in the middle car gets a little frustrated, puts his car in reverse, slams it right in the front of my wife's vehicle 3 days prior to when this car came crashing through.
So I want to hear you, but I also want to make sure that you understand there's going to be an entire meeting to.
Yeah, exactly.
Happy-
We're just putting
I
this
hear
through
you.
there and kind of laying the ground. Like, look, last year is if I was still in school, how I spent my summer vacation. Planning board meetings, conservation meetings. I feel like we're going to be doing another summer's worth. I understand the process. This is just preliminary.
Right.
So we're just really getting to start that. The major concerns really are the existing issues that happen. The fact that when the Allen Farm site transformed into what it is now, there was great relief on the reduction of car trips and that kind of traffic. And all we're really doing here is putting it in more and probably at a greater level. So that remains a major concern on that as we review here. I would have concern on the glass features that pulled through, because what happens now from where we look, and we look over onto the UMass property, when they redid that building, they put that glass kind of top to it. We get a reflection on that like the magnifying glass. So I would be concerned with morning sun coming up, reflecting off of the buildings and how it affects us. I would be concerned with lighting. Dark sky lighting is great for the dark sky, but when your property sits below the lighting, how does that affect it when it comes through? Wintertime, snow becomes an even greater reflector. The front of the building, laying into the lay of the land, being shorter than the back of the building. 4 stories doesn't seem that short to me against 5. 2 is shorter than 5. So somehow, and visually now, on the plan on the does this project cross Chestnut Street, or does it stay on?
It does not.
It does not, because I thought one of the site plans had shown that it also took the farmland.
Part of the parcel might be also across the street.
There was a parcel that was
building.
blocked.
That's possible.
Yeah.
So that this land it was at one time, as I understand it, much larger, and we have now limited our site area to what is shown here. So this side of Chestnut Street.
So how do we then in the future say, okay, can we somehow protect this land? Can we donate it like the developers next door? They donated property back to the town that just went there to time and preserve. This is a historic part of town. You know, the Allen Farm, as we talked about many times, was actually established 2 years before the town of Shrewsbury. There's people, there's a resident on the street that is part of that family that have, continuously lived there. So it's a very historic, part of town that somehow, if we can preserve some of it, would be great. Also, as Nancy said, we're not going to stop this thing right now. Chapter 40B has an awful lot of provisions. The town of Shrewsbury is in development mode. There's just no question about it. But what I would like to see as this goes forward and construction becomes part of the conversation, it has been an absolute nightmare with the truck traffic and the construction traffic going on at the Allen property. So I'd like to see provision put into this that any and all construction vehicles enter this site from Route 20 and not have the big loading vehicles. I mean, you can come and take a look at the road. It's falling apart. It's loud. I'm concerned about the grading, the 80-foot grade. Is this going to involve blasting? We endured 4.5 months of blasting that nobody knew if it was going to happen or not. There's just a lot of issues that sit here that start to make me shiver when we think about the whole process that we went through with this. And again, the health issues, the safety issues, and keep in mind that if it's an issue of local concern and health and safety, again, death is a pretty serious health issue. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishes to be heard? Okay. Rowan?
Well, I can say one last thing about the proposed timeline, if
Sure.
the board is ready to shift to that conversation.
Yes, I think we are.
Um,
Can I just make one more comment, please? Is that possible?
Sure.
When it comes to traffic surveys, I don't know, who's responsible, where that gets put to, but again, in the last survey, we need to have the Chestnut and the South Street intersection as part of that survey. We need to have somebody sit in my front yard and watch the trucks and watch the traffic as cars come down from Route 9 to Route 20. 90% of those cars are crossing that yellow line, and they're speeding at such a factor. So any traffic reviews need to go beyond the standard intersections, blah, 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 everything else. You really need to understand how that road works, sit in my property for a little bit, put on a pair of running shoes in case you get it out of the way, but also wherever who's responsible to make sure that those are part of the traffic reviews.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all right. Well, I think that's, these comments and I think they're a good example of why it would be helpful to talk about scheduling our subsequent meetings based on area of interest or topic. That was something that we did for the Pointed Hills Farm as well, and I think it provides good guidance to both the board, the applicant, and the public to anticipate what will be coming up next. So I don't have anything to put in front of the board or the applicant tonight. I want to examine our peer reviewers once we do reach out to them, understand their schedule, and then put together a proposed timeline for the board and the applicant. I'll make sure the applicant has availability, et cetera. But something, it may look like, next month we see the civil engineer review. We'll bring members from our engineering division to the meeting, and we can discuss any of those concerns brought up there. We could also talk about some of the waivers related to any of the engineering division oversights, et cetera. So I think that would be helpful. And at this point, we'd be looking at an engineering meeting, a traffic meeting, and then a water and sewer infrastructure meeting, and then potentially any others that come up over the course of the discussion. One thing to keep in mind is that we do have 180 days to close the public hearing, so that puts us in the February meeting. By that's our absolute end date, but in general, I see about 3 additional meetings for topic, and then any more that are needed after that. You could speak to the applicant further about that, but that's generally my proposed timeline.
I think that sounds good. Attorney Haverty, anything else that we need to be aware of?
No, I think you've got it pretty well covered so far.
Okay.
Other than the need to continue to a date certain.
Right. Okay. Great. Okay, well, to that end, can I get a motion?
We gotta close the public hearing.
Oh, excuse me.
No, you don't want to close
No,
the public
we
hearing.
don't. Who's gonna,
Continuing.
we're
I
continuing.
know, we do it every time though, Easy to get confused.
So do we want to continue, is it
We're gonna-
9:26?
It's on your
It's,
piece of paper. I
hang on.
found it for you. I
Your
think
piece
it's,
of Yeah, okay. So I move to continue this hearing to September 26, 2022 at 6:30 PM here in the Selectmen's Room for further review and discussion of the plans and waiver requests.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you. Thank you for everyone's time tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you.
all right. You
So now we can,
make a motion to close the meeting.
whole meeting.
We
Yeah,
don't have any other business.
all
Oh,
right.
yeah,
Whole
motion.
meeting.
So move to adjourn.
Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you.
Wouldn't believe it.
Good. Here, I will send.